Crumbs are not love, they are control, and I need you to let that land in your chest, not as an accusation toward them, but as clarity for you. Because for a long time you have been surviving on moments, not consistency. You have been collecting tiny pieces of attention, like they're proof that you matter. And I know why. Because when someone is dismissive, the smallest warmth feels like sunlight. A good morning once in a while. A random late night call when they're lonely. A plan that almost happens. A compliment that shows up after days of distance. And your heart, because it is loyal, starts to treat these crumbs like a meal. You start saying, at least they reached out. As if reaching out is the same thing as showing up. You start saying, they're trying in their own way. As if your needs are supposed to shrink to fit their comfort. You start saying, maybe I'm asking for too much, when all you were asking for was the bare minimum of respect, presence, and consistency. Crumbs are not accidental. They are not random. They are a strategy, even when it's unconscious, because crumbs keep you close without requiring them to be vulnerable. Crumbs keep you hopeful without requiring them to be accountable. Crumbs keep you available without requiring them to change. And the most heartbreaking part is this: you didn't accept crumbs because you were desperate. You accepted crumbs because you were sincere. You saw potential. You saw the moments where they were sweet, the moments where they opened up, the moments where it felt real, and you told yourself those moments meant something permanent. But the pattern kept repeating: warmth followed by withdrawal, connection followed by silence, intimacy followed by distance. And you kept trying to solve the puzzle. You kept trying to become easier to love, calmer, cooler, less emotional, less needy, less human. Because you thought if you could just present your heart in the right way, they would finally hold it. But listen to me, your heart was never the problem. The problem was the dynamic. The problem was that you were giving relationship energy to someone who was offering you convenience energy. The problem was that you were investing like a partner, while they were showing up like a visitor. And crumbs are how a visitor keeps a door open. A visitor doesn't want to move in, but they don't want to lose access either. So they leave a little trail, just enough to keep you tracking them, just enough to keep you waiting, just enough to keep you hoping. And your nervous system becomes trained on those crumbs. You start living for the notification, for the reply, for the next time they're in a good mood. And without realizing it, you start losing yourself. Because crumbs don't just starve your heart, they shrink your standards. They make you grateful for what should be normal. They make you celebrate what should be consistent. They make you question your worth for wanting what healthy love requires. And the longer you accept crumbs, the more you teach them, this is enough. Not with words, with energy, with your returning, with your forgiving, with your staying, with the way you keep making space for someone who keeps meeting you with half effort. And then comes the moment that changes everything, the moment you stop. You stop replying fast, you stop making excuses, you stop filling the silence, you stop chasing, you stop performing calm while you're breaking inside. You stop accepting the bare minimum and calling it love. And the reason that moment is so powerful is because it interrupts the control. Because crumbs only work on someone who is hungry. And you, in that moment, decide to feed yourself with dignity. This is where the dismissive avoidant begins to panic, not always in a soft way, not always in a romantic way, but in a nervous system way. Because for them, control is comfort. They learned somewhere along the line that closeness comes with consequences, that depending on someone is risky, that vulnerability is the moment you lose yourself or get hurt. So they keep relationships at a distance, and they manage connection with just enough effort to keep it from dying, but not enough depth to make it real. And when you stop accepting crumbs, you remove their ability to manage the relationship without showing up. You remove their ability to keep you as an option without calling you a priority. You remove their safety net, which was your willingness to stay even when it hurt. So they test you. They drop a breadcrumb, a casual, hey, a reaction to your story, a random check-in. Not, I'm sorry, not, I want to do better, just a tiny ping to see if you're still there. And if you respond the way you used to, they relax, because the pattern still works. But if you don't, or you respond with calm distance, something cracks. They feel irritation, because your boundary feels like rejection to someone who is used to being the one who withdraws. They feel restlessness, because they can't regulate themselves through your chasing anymore. They feel offended, because they interpret your self-respect as you trying to win. But beneath all that is fear. Fear that they might actually lose access to the person who loved them without requiring them to be brave. And I know, you might be sitting there thinking, so what? Now they care? And I want you to be careful with that thought. Because caring is not the same as choosing. Missing you is not the same as committing to you. Wanting access is not the same as wanting intimacy. Sometimes what looks like obsession is withdrawal symptoms from control. It's the nervous system reacting to a change, not the heart stepping into maturity. And that's why you must stop measuring their feelings and start measuring their actions. Because crumbs can come in intense packaging too. They can come as a long message, a sudden apology, a burst of attention. But if the pattern returns, the crumbs return, and so does the starvation. So here is what I want you to hold on to, like a promise to yourself. You are allowed to be hungry for real love. You are allowed to want consistency without feeling guilty. You are allowed to want someone who doesn't make you earn basic effort. You are allowed to want a relationship that feels safe in your body, not anxious, not uncertain, not like you're constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop. And the moment you stop accepting crumbs, you're not being harsh, you're being healthy. You're not being cold, you're being clear. You're not punishing them, you're protecting you. Because crumbs are not love, they are control. And the day you finally refuse them is the day you stop being controlled by hope. You step out of the cycle. You stop negotiating with your self-worth. You stop offering partner-level devotion to someone who only shows up when it's convenient. And whether they regret it or not, whether they chase or not, whether they obsess or not, you have already won the most important battle, the one where you choose yourself, without anger, without drama, just with quiet dignity, and the decision that says, I deserve a full meal. They don't forget you, they file you away, and I know how brutal that sounds when your heart has been begging for evidence that you mattered. Because from your side, silence feels like erasure. It feels like someone waking up, living their day, laughing, eating, sleeping, as if you were never a part of their world. And you start asking yourself the questions that hurt the most in private. Was I that easy to replace? Was I that easy to ignore? Was I only loved when it was convenient? But listen to me carefully. What you are calling forgotten is often something else entirely. It is emotional compartmentalization. It is a coping mechanism. It is a survival strategy built by a nervous system that learned long ago. If I feel too much, I lose control. A dismissive avoidant doesn't always walk away because they don't care. Sometimes they walk away because caring feels dangerous. They have learned to keep love in a box, a sealed room inside their mind where no one can reach them, because if no one reaches them, no one can hurt them. So when something gets intense, when closeness starts asking for consistency, when real intimacy starts demanding presence, they do what they've always done, they file it away. They label it as, not that serious. They call it, just stress. They call it, I'm busy. They call it, I need space. And those words help them stay numb. Those words help them avoid the one thing they fear most, feeling the weight of what they've done, and feeling the weight of what they actually want. And you become part of that filing system. Not because you were meaningless, but because you were meaningful. because you touched something in them that they don't know how to hold without panicking. You became the person who saw behind the mask, the person who asked for more than surface level connection, the person whose love came with a mirror. And that mirror is what they avoid. So they don't delete you, they store you. They tuck you into a mental drawer, and they tell themselves, I'll deal with that later. Later becomes weeks. Later becomes months. Later becomes a life where they act fine, while something unresolved keeps breathing under the surface. This is why your absence becomes so powerful when you finally stop accepting crumbs. Because while you were available, you made it easy for them to keep you filed away. They could disappear and still know you were there. They could go quiet and still know you would return. They could offer a breadcrumb and watch you come back to the table. Your availability gave them the luxury of avoidance. Your patience gave them the comfort of postponing accountability. But when you stop trying, when you stop feeding the dynamic, when you stop making yourself available to someone who keeps you in uncertainty, you remove their ability to file you away peacefully. You turn that drawer into a drum. You turn that sealed room into a place that starts knocking from the inside. At first, it doesn't look like heartbreak, it looks like restlessness. It looks like them checking their phone more than usual, then tossing it aside like it doesn't matter. It looks like them scrolling through old messages and closing the chat fast, as if being caught by their own feelings would be humiliating. It looks like them thinking of you at random moments and getting annoyed at themselves for thinking of you. Because in their mind, missing you is weakness, caring is risk, longing is surrender, and they don't like surrender. They like control, so they resist the feeling by doing what they do best, distracting. They stay busy. They stay social. They stay entertained. They flirt, they post, they work, they do anything that keeps them from sitting alone long enough to hear what their body is trying to say. But this is the problem with filing something away. It doesn't disappear, it waits. And the more they try to outrun it, the more it starts showing up in unexpected places. In their sleep, in their mood, in the way they feel irritated for no reason, in the way they feel empty even when they're surrounded by people, in the way they keep comparing new attention to the one person who actually felt like home, the one person who didn't just want them, but wanted to know them. Then your name becomes a thought that returns. Not because they are romantic suddenly, but because unresolved things repeat. The mind circles what the heart refuses to process, and you become the unresolved thing. They start wondering how you're doing, not in a gentle way at first, but in a curious way. They start wondering if you've moved on, not because they want you to be happy, but because they want to know if they still have access. Because the truth is, filing you away often includes an assumption. The assumption that the file will still be there when they return. The assumption that you will wait. The assumption that your love is a constant resource they can come back to whenever it suits them. And when they begin to sense that the file might be gone, that you're not waiting, that your energy has shifted, that you are choosing yourself, something happens inside them. The drawer starts rattling. The panic rises. The need to regain certainty grows. And this is where their regret begins to sharpen. Because regret is often the realization that you treated something precious like it was permanent. They start replaying moments. The way you tried. The way you asked for clarity. The way you softened even when you were hurt. The way you stayed kind even when they were distant. And suddenly, those moments stop feeling like something they could take for granted. But I need you to hear this part, because it's where people like you get pulled back in. When they finally open that file, they may not open it with humility. They may open it with intensity. They may reach out suddenly, dramatically, emotionally, because the feelings they avoided have been building pressure. They may say, I miss you, and mean it. They may say, I've been thinking about you, and mean it. But meaning it in a moment is not the same as choosing you in a life. If they truly changed, you will see it in steadiness, not spikes. In consistent effort, not bursts of attention. In accountability, not charm. Because filing you away is not love, it's avoidance. And if they reach for you from that place, they may be reaching for comfort, not connection. They may be reaching for the familiar stability you gave them, the emotional safety you provided, without being willing to offer you the same in return. And you cannot go back to being someone's emotional storage unit, the person they keep on a shelf for when life feels lonely. So let this truth protect you. You were not forgotten because you were unworthy. You were filed away because you were real. And the moment you stop accepting crumbs, the file becomes louder. But your job is not to make them open it. Your job is to decide what you will accept if they do. Your job is to stop believing that being chosen later is better than being loved properly now. Your job is to remember that love is not someone remembering you when they're afraid to lose you. Love is someone showing up when they have the chance to keep you. And if you're sitting there right now, hoping that they will finally feel it, I want you to hold on to something stronger than hope, self-respect. Because the most powerful outcome is not them obsessing over the file. The most powerful outcome is you no longer living like a file in someone else's drawer. The most powerful outcome is you becoming the person who refuses to be stored, who refuses to be postponed, who refuses to be loved on a schedule that only serves someone else's fear. You deserve presence, not postponement. You deserve a partner, not a visitor. You deserve a love that doesn't need you to disappear before it finally pays attention. Regret often starts as irritation and pride, and I know that sounds unfair. Because you've been the one crying quietly, the one replaying conversations, the one wondering what you did wrong, while they seemed fine. You wanted their regret to look like softness, like humility, like someone showing up at your door with truth in their hands. But with a dismissive avoidant, the first wave of regret is not always tenderness. It is often resistance. It is the nervous system refusing to admit loss. It is the ego trying to stay intact. It is the mind trying to regain control over a situation that suddenly feels unpredictable. And the reason it hurts you so much is because you mistake their irritation for proof that you never mattered. But irritation is sometimes the first sign that the old dynamic has stopped working, and that they can't emotionally bypass you the way they used to. Think about what changed. You didn't become cruel, you became calm. You didn't attack them, you stopped chasing them. You didn't punish them. You stopped rewarding inconsistency. And that shift is the trigger. Because when you were still available, when you were still replying fast, still explaining, still forgiving, still staying, they could keep you in a comfortable distance. They could give crumbs and still feel in control. They could disappear and return, and the relationship would still be there, waiting like a lamp left on in an empty room. Your effort made their avoidance affordable. Your patience made their inconsistency consequence-free. And when you remove that, their nervous system panics. Not always with tears, but with agitation. So stage 3 of their regret looks like pride trying to hold the crown while the ground beneath it cracks. They tell themselves they don't care. Then they check your social media. They tell themselves you're overreacting. Then they reread your last message. They tell themselves you're playing games. Then they feel a tightness in their chest when they realize you haven't reached out. They start getting irritated at your silence, not because silence is wrong, but because silence is something they can't control. They can't argue with it. They can't charm it. They can't manipulate it into reassurance. They can only sit with it, and sitting with it is exactly what they avoid. This is where the testing begins. They send a casual message, a breadcrumb dressed like confidence. Hey, are you okay? A random joke. A tiny tap on the glass of your life to see if you still turn your head. And if you respond like the old you, warm and immediate, They relax, because the pattern is alive again. But if you don't, if you respond calmly, or you take your time, or you keep it short, their pride flares. They might act offended. They might act cold. They might suddenly become distant again, as if they are the one choosing space. Because a dismissive avoidant would rather leave first than feel left. They would rather act like it doesn't matter than admit it matters. They would rather control the narrative than face the truth. And here is the truth. Your silence forces them into a new position, the position of uncertainty. They are used to you being the certain one. They are used to your love being predictable. They are used to the idea that no matter how far they pull away, you will still be there. And when that certainty disappears, it activates something deep. It activates the fear of losing access. Not just losing you, losing the comfort of being chosen, without having to choose you back with full effort. And that fear often doesn't show up as sadness first. It shows up as irritation, because irritation is a protective emotion. It keeps them from feeling vulnerable. It keeps them from admitting they're scared. It keeps them from saying the sentence that would require them to change. I might have messed this up. This is the moment where they start rewriting the story in their head. They may tell themselves you were too needy, too emotional, too demanding, too intense. Not because it's true, but because it's easier than facing the real reason the connection broke, which is that you finally stopped accepting less than you deserved. And that's why this stage can feel so cruel, because they can become sharper when they feel you slipping away. They can become dismissive again, not because they are over you, but because they are trying to regain emotional height. If they can make you feel small, they can feel big. If they can make you doubt yourself, they can feel safe. And you have to remember, this is not love speaking, this is fear dressed as superiority. Then something shifts, because pride can only hold for so long when the loss becomes real. They start noticing the space you left behind. They notice that you are not chasing. They notice that you are not begging for reassurance. They notice that you are not available on demand. And that's when the irritation turns into fixation. Your name becomes a thought that keeps returning. Your absence becomes a question they can't answer. They start wondering what you're doing, who you're talking to, whether you've moved on. And the reason this becomes obsessive is because obsession is often the mind's attempt to regain certainty. They want to know if they still matter, because if they still matter, they still have control. If they still have control, they don't have to feel the full weight of regret. But here is where you must be so careful. Because when their regret begins to intensify, they may come back with intensity too. They may suddenly show emotion. They may suddenly say the right words. They may suddenly want to see you, talk to you, reconnect. And it can feel like the dream you've been praying for, because you wanted them to finally feel. But intensity is not the same as stability. A dismissive avoidant can become very intense when their nervous system is activated, because the fear of losing you creates urgency. But urgency is not always maturity. Urgency is not always commitment. Sometimes urgency is simply the ego, trying to pull you back into a dynamic where they don't have to change, they just have to regain access. So if they reach out in this stage, don't let your heart do all the interpreting. Let your standards speak. Let your boundaries speak. Ask yourself, are they taking responsibility, or are they trying to soothe their anxiety? Are they willing to have uncomfortable conversations, or do they only offer romance? Are they consistent after the emotional moment passes, or do they disappear again once they feel secure? Because real regret doesn't just say, I miss you. Real regret says, I understand how I hurt you, and I am willing to show up differently, consistently, not once, not when I'm lonely, but as a new pattern. And I want you to hear this, because it will free you. Their irritation is not your fault. Their pride is not proof you were wrong. Their testing is not a sign you should chase harder. It is proof that your boundary is working. It is proof that the crumbs no longer have power over you. And the moment you stop being moved by their mood, the moment you stop being pulled by their push and pull, you become something they can't easily dismiss anymore. You become the mirror they can't control. So let them feel their irritation. Let them wrestle with their pride. Let them sit in the discomfort of not being able to access you the way they used to. Because the most heart-touching thing you can do for yourself is not to win them back. It is to stop losing yourself. You can love deeply and still walk away from crumbs. You can miss someone and still protect your dignity. You can hope they grow. But you don't have to sacrifice your peace while they decide. Your love was never the weakness. The only weakness was abandoning yourself to keep someone else comfortable. And this time, you're not doing that. Obsession is not always devotion. Sometimes it is the desperate craving to regain certainty, access, and control. And if you have ever been on the receiving end of it, you know how confusing it can feel. Because one day they are distant, unavailable, giving you crumbs like you should be grateful. And the next day they are suddenly watching you, reaching for you, circling back, acting like they can't stop thinking about you. And your heart wants to believe it means, they finally realized my value. Your heart wants to believe it means, they finally love me the way I needed. But I need you to see the truth with tenderness, not bitterness, because the truth will protect you. Sometimes what looks like obsession is not love blooming. It is control withdrawing. It is the nervous system panicking. It is the ego reacting to the fact that you are no longer available on demand. A dismissive avoidant often feels safest when they can manage the distance. They like relationships where they can decide when to come close and when to pull away. They like being wanted without being required. They like being missed without being held accountable. And when you were still accepting crumbs, they could keep that balance. They could vanish, return, give a little warmth, take it away again, and the relationship would still be there, because you stayed. Your staying made it easy for them to believe the connection was permanent, even when their effort was temporary. Your love became something they could access when it suited them, and put down when it didn't. Then you change. You stop chasing. You stop soothing the silence. You stop rewarding inconsistency with more effort. You stop proving your worth to someone who keeps moving the finish line. And that is when obsession can begin, because your absence creates uncertainty, and uncertainty is what they cannot tolerate. It is not always the pain of missing you that triggers them first. It is the fear of losing control. The fear of not knowing what you're doing, who you're talking to, whether you've moved on, whether they still have access to you. Because as long as they believe you're still emotionally available, they can stay calm. But when they sense you might be gone for real, their nervous system lights up, and the mind becomes desperate to regain certainty. This is why they start reaching in ways that don't match the relationship they were offering you. They may suddenly watch your stories the second you post. They may suddenly react, reply, circle back. They may ask questions they never asked before, not because they suddenly became curious about your soul, but because they are scanning for information. They are trying to locate you emotionally. They are trying to find out if you're still theirs in some way. And the reason it can feel so intense is because intensity is easier than consistency for someone who struggles with real intimacy. Intensity can happen in a burst. It doesn't require a stable new pattern. It only requires an activated nervous system. Sometimes their obsession looks romantic. They send long messages. They talk about missing you. They bring up memories. They speak softly. They say things that make your heart melt, because you've been starving for tenderness. And you have to be careful here, because your hunger can make anything feel like nourishment. But obsession often comes with a hidden demand, the demand that you reassure them, the demand that you return, The demand that you make them feel safe again without them having to do the deeper work. It can sound like love, but it is often anxiety. Anxiety that they might lose the supply of comfort your attention gave them. Other times their obsession looks controlling. They get jealous, but they never claimed you. They ask where you've been, but they never showed up. They act possessive, but they never protected the relationship. They suddenly care about the things they ignored, because now those things are no longer guaranteed. And that can feel infuriating, because it's like watching someone value water only when the well is drying up. But this is the pattern: the mind grabs hardest when it senses loss. Not always because it loves deeply, but because it fears the consequences of not appreciating what it had. And here is the hardest truth: obsession is often about access, not intimacy. Access means, I can reach you when I want. Intimacy means, I will be present even when it's hard. Access is easy, intimacy requires courage. Access is a message at midnight. Intimacy is a conversation in daylight. Access is a burst of attention when they feel lonely. Intimacy is steady effort when they feel comfortable. Access is pulling you back in so they feel powerful again. Intimacy is meeting you halfway, even when it requires humility. So how do you tell the difference? How do you know whether what you're seeing is devotion or desperation? You look for consistency after the intensity passes. You look for accountability, not just affection. You look for a willingness to sit in discomfort, to hear how they hurt you without defending themselves, to name their pattern without blaming you for it. You look for changes that cost them something, not just words that cost them nothing. Because real love doesn't only show up when it's afraid. Real love shows up when it's secure. Real love doesn't chase you to win you back. It chooses you daily so you never have to wonder. And I want you to hear this, because it's where your power returns. You are not meant to be someone's obsession. You are meant to be someone's peace. You are not meant to be the prize they chase when they feel threatened. You are meant to be the person they cherish when they feel calm. You are not meant to be the lesson they learn only after they lose you. You are meant to be loved while you are still there. While you are still trying. While you are still open. So if their obsession arrives, don't let it rewrite history. Don't let it make you forget the nights you cried, the days you waited, the times you felt alone in a relationship. Don't let their sudden intensity make you doubt the reality of their consistent absence. You can acknowledge that they feel something now, and still choose yourself. You can accept that they are afraid to lose you, and still require proof that they are willing to keep you properly. Because your heart is not a door they get to knock on harder when it's closing. Your heart is a home, and homes are for people who show up, not only when they panic, but when they promise, when they commit, when they grow. Let this be the line you hold with quiet dignity: I will not confuse obsession with devotion. I will not trade my peace for someone else's panic. I will not return to crumbs just because they're served with intensity. If you want me, choose me with consistency, choose me with effort, choose me with respect, not in a burst, but in a life. And if they can't, then their obsession is not your responsibility. Your healing is.